The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you. It's haunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. From my reflections I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
That ought to
ghost
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, Old Boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How is everybody tonight? I hope everybody's having a good evening.
I believe that there are many lessons to be learned from the past. By examining what has happened before, we can learn how to avoid making those same mistakes again. We can also learn crucial lessons in survival. We live in one of the least self-sufficient times in history. Literally everything that we need or that we want can easily be attained by simply driving down the street and buying it. For most of human history, it was much more difficult to obtain the basics of life, the things that would enable you to survive and make it to another day. To me, that is what makes some of the most amazing achievements of the past even more amazing. On tonight's episode, we are going to be talking about an achievement that to this day we can't really match. Tonight's episode is going to be on the pyramids, and more specifically, how they were built. How did a civilization that, by modern standards, would be considered rather primitive, managed to do something that we would have a hard time duplicating with today's modern technology? The most popular theory on how the Egyptians managed to do this is that they carried huge hand-carved stones up very large ramps to set them in place. I will cover a lot of the more popular theories on how they built the pyramids on this episode. But another equally interesting question to me is, how did they get these gigantic limestone blocks over 100 miles and in some cases over 200 miles? Last year in 2017, there was a groundbreaking discovery made that could possibly shed some light on that very question. There was a papyrus discovered that contained a first-hand account of how it was done by someone who actually helped to build the pyramids. Zahi Hawass is the Minister of Antiquities and the former Chief Inspector of the site of the pyramids. And he called this the greatest discovery in Egypt of the century. Now, this statement would lead me to believe that there is a good chance that this papyrus might actually be the real deal. This papyrus diary was found by a team of Egyptian and French scholars on the Red Sea in the port of Wadi al-Jarf. The diary was written by an official named Merer and is the only known first-hand account of how the Great Pyramid was built that is in existence. In his diary, Merer talks about working for the half-brother of Pharaoh Khufu, a nobleman named Ankh-Haf. Merer also claimed that he was in charge of about 40 men. In his diary, he talks about how limestone that was quarried in Tura, which is about 12 miles south of Cairo, was transported by boat across the Nile River through specially built canals that were built by his team of men. One of these boats was actually unearthed at the bottom of the pyramids. After being brought down the river, the stone blocks were dropped off near the building site by the workers, using ropes to unload them from the boats. The blocks were then moved closer using a system of tracks. The workers transported approximately 170,000 tons of limestone, just like this. And it is believed that a similar system was used to move the granite from the quarry in Aswan, which is located several hundred miles away from Giza. Isn't that amazing? Around 2550 BC, Pharaoh Khufu started construction on the Great Pyramid at Giza. The Great Pyramid is made up of approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. And each block is unbelievably massive, weighing in at between 2.5 and 15 tons, depending on the block. At the time that the Great Pyramid was built, it was 481 feet tall. Now today it stands at 455 feet, because over time the pyramid has begun to sink into the sand. Imagine that though, stacking massive stone blocks weighing as much as 15 tons, 481 feet in the air. That is absolutely mind-blowing. Now keep in mind that these people did not have giant mechanical cranes or forklifts that would do the heavy lifting for them. Knowing that the pyramids were built using primarily manpower, you might ask, well, how many men would it take to build something that was so massive? Well, according to Greek historian Herodotus, the pyramids were built by approximately 100,000 men. Today's Egyptologists think that the number was probably more like between 20 and 30,000 men. Now, that's not exact. They base that number on the size of the pyramid, the tombs around the pyramid, and the cemeteries. That's why they think it's between 20 and 30,000. I personally think it's much higher than that. Now, as always, when you have an ancient mystery like this one, there is going to be the obligatory alien theory. Now, some people believe that aliens helped to build the pyramids. They claim that the fact that the pyramids at Giza align with the stars of Orion's belt, and the fact that they are in so much better shape than pyramids that were built much later, prove that aliens must be responsible. But as usual with these kind of crazy theories, they haven't really done their homework. They don't quite know what they're talking about. Because the pyramids at Giza have undergone intensive preservation efforts over many, many years. And that right there explains why they are in much better condition. And as this show goes on, I'm going to explain a lot of the theories of how they actually did this and how some of these things have been replicated modern day in different experiments. And you will see that it does not take aliens with spaceships to build these things. It is a monumental task. It is a very, very, very impressive task, not taking anything away from it. I don't think we could pull it off today, to be honest with you. But it does not have to be aliens that did it. Prior to this papyrus being discovered, there were all kinds of interesting theories about how they moved the stones and about how the pyramids were actually built. Now, before I go any further, it is important to note that this isn't necessarily a situation where only one of these theories can be correct. Most likely, it was a mixed match of several of these methods that were used. In 2014, researchers from the University of Amsterdam conducted an experiment to try to figure out how the Egyptians were able to move such heavy blocks. They based the idea of the experiment on a painting that they found in a tomb from around 1800 BC. The painting showed a worker dumping water onto the sand to help a sledge moving a very large statue. So they took a bunch of heavy stones and they loaded it onto a sledge and they tried to haul it across the sand. And they proved that it took roughly half the force to move the sledge on wet sand as it did on dry sand. The reason for this is because wet sand will stick to itself and it forms a more solid surface than dry sand does. Dry sand just kind of goes all over the place. The fact that it sticks to itself and the surface is more solid makes it substantially easier to pull the sledge across the wet sand. Wet sand also does not bunch up in front of the sledge like dry sand does, which also makes the whole process much, much easier. Another theory suggested that the workers secured wooden beams all around the block, making it round enough that the stone could be rolled instead of dragged. That's kind of an interesting theory. I don't think that theory holds much weight, honestly, and that's kind of a pun because the reason that I don't think it holds any weight is because the weight of the stones. If you build a framework out of wood and then you try to roll it like a ball, basically, when you're talking stones that weigh up to 15 tons, there's no way that wooden frame is going to survive. Within a couple revolutions, that thing is going to be busted all to hell. So I don't buy that theory at all. In 2013, there was an engineer named Peter James who had a company, and his company spent 2 decades almost restoring the pyramids. And he took on the idea that the Egyptians used ramps to drag the stones into place. He claimed that it would be impossible because the ramps would have to be at least 1/4 mile long. Otherwise, they would be way too steep to be able to move those blocks on. His theory is that the workers crafted the inner core of the pyramids with much smaller blocks, and they used a series of smaller zigzagging ramps to do so. And then they constructed a scaffolding to build the outer core with much larger rocks. I think this is very interesting because essentially, this is how a house is built today. Now, granted, you're not using, granted, that's another pun. You're not using limestone and granite most times to build a house. These huge, massive stones, you're using wood. But the theory behind it, the principle behind it is much the same. You are starting with the inside and you're working your way out. In the mid-80s, Joseph Davidovits, who was the director of the Geopolymer Institute in France, came up with a very interesting theory. He theorized that the blocks that were used to build the pyramids were actually a composite of several different materials. So they weren't pure limestone. He believed that they were a mix of limestone, clay, and lime mixed with water to form the blocks. So essentially what he was saying here is that he believed that the Egyptians were using an ancient form of concrete to essentially cast these blocks. Most likely, in a lot of the cases, they would probably cast them in place. Because if you had the ability to use concrete, why would you pour and make a giant stone that you then had to haul? Why not just haul buckets of concrete and dump them into a form that you've built and kind of cast the stones right there in place where they needed to be? To me, that makes way more sense. Especially once you're talking about the very top of the pyramid. It would be much easier to use poured cast stones than it would be to try to bring those stones in one big hunk all the way up to the top. 20 years later, Professor Michael Barsom from the Department of Material Sciences and Engineering at Drexel University decided that he was going to test that very theory. And he was able to prove several things through his experiments. The first thing that he proved was that the stones, both inside and outside the pyramids, appeared to be reconstituted limestone. So what that means is that they were not the original form of limestone. They were made into limestone blocks. He also found that the stones contained a lot of water and were amorphous. And for those that don't know what amorphous means, it simply means that they were without a clearly defined shape or any form. This is extremely unusual to find in limestone. Silicon dioxide nanoscale spheres were present in one of the samples, and that indicated that the blocks were not natural limestone, but once again, reconstituted limestone. So to sum up, he determined that it was very unlikely that the inner and outer casing stones that he had examined were chiseled from natural limestone. So that kind of answers one of the questions that we've always had about the pyramids, is why don't we see all these chisel marks? If these things were chiseled out of massive blocks of granite and limestone, how the hell did they do that without chisel marks? Well, this answers that question. If they were poured in place in forms, there would be no need to chisel them, because you're measuring and you're making them the exact size that you need them, and you're pouring them exactly where you need them, so you know they fit. So what does all this mean? Which one of these theories are correct? Well, in my opinion, it was probably a combination of several of them. I think that it is very likely that huge blocks of limestone and granite were cut from different quarries and transported to the build site. I think that they were moved using the river and the series of canals that the Papyrus Diary talks about. That makes complete, perfect sense to me. I think that when they had to drag these massive blocks across the stand to load them onto the boats and to unload them at the build site, I think that they most likely wetted the sand to make it easier to drag them. To me, that also makes sense. I don't think it would be something out of the realm of possibility, because we have that painting that shows that knowledge was in existence with the Egyptians in the time period. They knew how to do that. So if they knew how to do that, why wouldn't they do that when they were moving the blocks, right? So that makes total sense as well. The science tells us that the blocks that were examined were not chiseled, but they were cast. So the huge blocks were most likely broken down using hammers, whatever, smashed into finer pieces, and then they were mixed with clay and lime and water to make a form of concrete, and that they were poured in place most likely. That would make the job much easier to do. It would make it much quicker, and it would require much less people to get the job done. All of that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, unfortunately for all you UFO buffs out there, I don't think that aliens played any part in the building of the pyramids. But hey, don't get discouraged. You've always got Stonehenge and the Nazca Lines. So there are still some things out there for you guys to theorize about where you might actually be right. But as far as the pyramids go, I think on this one, it's just not, the evidence just isn't there. I think it's pretty plain to see how some of this was done. Now, there's still a lot of unanswered questions that this evidence here does not answer. But I think it gives us a pretty good inkling of the basics of how it was built. As far as the numbers of workers, you had Herodotus saying 100,000. Modern Egypt people say 20 to 30,000. I think most likely that number is somewhere in between. Probably closer to the 100,000 mark. Because remember, they'll say, well, if you pour it in place, it takes less people. That's very, very true. But you still had to have massive teams of people in order to quarry that stone and to bring these giant blocks of stone down to the river to drag them there, to get them there. Even with wetting the sand, that's still a massive weight to move. So you had to have a lot of people to do that. Then you had to have people that were able to take it down the river on the boat and through the canals. Then you have to have people to unload at the site. Now, I'm pretty sure that the people at the quarry didn't drag it down to the boat, get on the boat, ride all the way down to the build site. In the case of the granite, it's like over 200 miles. All the way down to the build site, get out, drag it to the build site, break it apart, make concrete, take it up there, pour it in place, all that. I'm sure that wasn't the same group of people. So you had one massive group of people at the quarry site who was cutting the stone, who were loading the stone, dragging the stone. Then you had a group of people on the boat that transported the stone. Then when they got it where they were going, you'd have to have people at the canals to work the canals. If there was any kind of locks or anything like that on the canals, you'd have to have people there for that. If it was anything like the Panama Canal was. If it wasn't, if it was just a series of trenches that were dug in and filled with water so the boat could get through, you wouldn't need people there. But you'd have to have people at the build site to unload. Now remember, these blocks are still massive at this point, so it's going to take a lot of people to get these things off the boats and drag them across the sand to the spot to where the other workers could start breaking them down. So then you're going to have another team of workers whose job it is to take big old sledgehammer-like things and bust these big blocks apart into smaller pieces. And then you have to have people that know how to make concrete to take these smaller pieces, mix them with the proper stuff, and make concrete out of them. Then, since you don't have a concrete truck that can drive it up there and just put a pipe right down in your form, you've got to haul that concrete mix up to the spot where you're pouring. So that's going to take a lot of more people to carry buckets full to dump into the form. So you're going to have a long line of people because you can't just have a few, because you got to get that form filled quickly. Because if you let concrete sit too long, it hardens, it sets up. So you got to get it up there. Even though it's not Quikrete, you still got to get it up there. So you have the mix going, and then you have people probably like they used to do it with fires, how you'd have the bucket brigade. You probably had something like that lined up where people were just filling the buckets and handing them to the next guy. And it was making its way all the way up and getting dumped into the form, and the empty buckets would come back. I think that's probably, they had some kind of system like that working. So you got to have a lot of people in that line. More people, the higher you go. So you had to have a lot of people to do this. Now keep in mind how many stones were used. 2.3 million. So in order to build this pyramid in a 20 to 40 year time frame, you got to have 3 shifts running. So you take all those people that I just described, and you have to multiply that number by 3. Because they can't work around the clock. You got 3 different shifts working. So I think there might have been around 30,000 people per shift. That makes sense. So then if you multiply that by 3, you get 90,000. So give or take some, you're right in that range of the 100,000 that Herodotus spoke of. So I think that's possible. You know, I think it's somewhere up there. It's in between 75 and 100,000 people, I would say, give or take a few thousand. You got to have a lot of people to accomplish this because this is the age before machinery. It's not like now where you could just hook this thing up to a crane and bring a big old massive bucket of concrete up and dump it. You know, you got to walk that stuff up. You got to haul those stones by hand. You don't have machinery. So to me, that makes perfect sense. So we are not going to cover every aspect of the pyramids. There's a lot of really cool stuff about the pyramids that we will get to in other shows because I love the pyramids. I love ancient Egypt. This is a subject that I know a lot about and I really enjoy. So we will definitely cover it again. But I wanted to cover this little bit because of that papyrus that was found, and it would answer some of the questions. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy now and get his opinion on this and see if he has any other insights to offer up.
And thank you, buddy. Let's get into this right now. What my opinion is on how they built the pyramids. Well, you know what? James gives me some good ideas and the good theories they have. They used the sand and made it wet so they can move the rocks And I believe that might be one of the ways they did it. That could be a possibility, and it probably is fact. Or there's another theory that they use sound. And some people will, what are you talking about? You can move things if you haven't they have these new tanks that they're magnetic. And they're building them so they can, for crowd control, for like a riot or a protest, so they can push people back. And what it is, they don't have to hurt anybody. And it pushes people backwards. It pushes force. It's magnetic. What I think was how they did all this, and here's my opinion, was from another civilization, like the Atlanteans or the Sumerians. And it's possibility it was the Atlanteans because they had pyramids supposedly till they fell in the ocean. And I also want to get into where I think they also got taught by, here comes the alien thing, guys, and actually I do think they helped us. I don't think they built the pyramids. I believe that, like James said, about 8 to 100,000 Egyptians. I think they used, over years, you got to remember, a lot of people died, but they probably brought new ones in all the time and took some out. I don't believe they worked them all. They either worked them to death or they moved them along and sold them and got newer ones for, the younger, the more work you're going to get out. So what I think is they learned how to do this by the Atlanteans or some higher civilization, because then some people, they even had sewer and sewer lines and bathrooms like you would have here. They're now not as good, but pretty well up there. So what I'm saying is maybe they got shown how to do it, and maybe we don't know what the tools are because they either took off with them or they sank in the ocean or they buried them, because a lot of people don't realize in this, like in the pyramids and the Sphinx that's next to it, they put caverns in there that we still haven't opened. There's stuff we haven't seen all together in this. And like he was saying, there's water where there's lakes in it and stuff like that. That's true. So what I'm thinking is, and they have, you also got to remember, they have pyramids in Peru. They have pyramids supposedly on Antarctica. They have one in Mars, supposedly. And even, I think they have the Atlanteans and the Sumerians supposedly did too. So the Aztecs, God, there's a whole bunch of them. So why was it just there when there's proven there's other places they done it? So what I think is when we were saying it was points to the stars, I think it was a special, and James, this is a new theory, and this is my theory. You remember how there's like different points over the world, like you were saying with Easter Island and Stonehenge? I think Stonehenge has something to do with the pyramids too. I think, because they were saying there's a new theory how they did this. Might have been time travel, how they figured out to move something to there. And that's a possibility. That was something I was reading about. This is the new theory. But what I think is these were like something, these pyramids got some kind of power. Maybe they had something on top of the pyramids that I think it went all over the world at one time. So they attracted this, and I think it was because of the sun. If you ever seen like the Aztecs, the sun, and they had this big sundial and stuff like that, I believe they got energy from the sun somehow, and maybe that helped them build these things. They got the energy from the sun somehow. I don't know. This is just a theory. Or they could have just done it themselves. That's a possibility too. But like I was telling James earlier, there was a guy who was a stone cutter who does all this stuff, and he says that he can't even do it now. So he doesn't even know how they would be able to do it. What I'm coming to is maybe they got taught by the Atlanteans, or another civilization showed them how to do this. And maybe they use sound, or maybe they just wet the ground. And like James was saying earlier, in that theory that they came with boats and they lifted the rocks up and then poured cement into the foundations and the pyramids. So that might be a possibility. I wouldn't doubt that, because there is proof that there was all these slaves that died. They had the graveyards. And that's true, because back then when you were a slave, that was your option. You either did work or you died, or you got sold to something else to do some other, because that's not the only thing they were doing in Egypt. They were doing the Sphinx, and they were digging for gold, and they had you do all kinds of stuff. It was also in Rome they did stuff. So when they get, what people realize when they got these slaves, they didn't just get anybody. They got the best slaves so they can work the hardest. So they breeded slaves too to get the better breed so you can harder worker. And that's what they did. So the guy who's been doing it for 5 years, they got rid of him, or he died from heat exhaustion or just overwork, and they got the new kid in. And so he could do more work. And so that's what happens. I think they rotated him. That's why there wasn't a lot of people who had died as much, and that's why it looks like, it was only 70,000. But if you think about it, if they rotated every 3 months or 4 months, 10,000 slaves here, then they rotated them again and again, then that possibility was like 100,000 people. And that's what I think they did. They did a rotation. And I think that's why you had minimum people dying, because I think they started figuring out when they first were building it, people were dying. So they said, well, instead of overworking these slaves, I know they don't care, but they know that they can't just keep doing it because they're going to run out of people. So they rotated them like a job. They sent them to do something else while they picked up the rocks. They could have done it that way, a whole rotation, and kept flipping everybody on jobs like they do, like in different job places. You work here for 6 months and then you work there for 6 months. You see what I'm saying? So you have different jobs so you don't get wearing out, and people stay happy. You won't have revolts or people trying to take over the kingdom at the time in Egypt. So that's what I think they did. There's my opinion on it. I don't want to throw out the whole alien thing now, because there is proof that is not 100% that they didn't do anything, but it's highly unlikely. But they had something to do with it, though. I do believe they had something to do with it. I think they helped our ancestors in a lot of things they've done. I just believe that. I think we didn't just learn how to make things. I mean, some things, yes, but with Roswell, they said that's how we got the iPhone parts and computer chips and stuff like that, and metal and body armor now. It's impossible they didn't have anything to do with it, because we know they probably did. They probably didn't build it, but I think that they showed us how to, or they left the tools and the paperwork to get this done, the material, you know what I'm saying? Like now we do, because we copy the past. People don't get it. We do copy the past. Everything recycles. It may be better, but it does recycle. The past does repeat itself majority of the time. Like now you build a thing. It's for earthquake proof. So it doesn't swing back and forth when an earthquake comes. I mean, it does swing, back and forth, so it doesn't topple over. So they know how to do that. So, and 200 years from now, it'll probably be flying in the air, so you don't have to worry about earthquakes anymore. So that's my opinion. I don't think that, don't quote me on that, but that's a possibility that could happen. You could have floating cities, so you're not going to have to worry about. You might have to worry about the weather then, but I mean, if you have it stable enough, you could probably make it where it doesn't fly back and forth, and flopple back and forth like in an earthquake, like Jello. Jello goes back and forth when it gets shaken, like an earthquake. I live in California, like James, he lives in Virginia, so he doesn't really know about this. I mean, I bet he's been in one because he lived in Texas, and they have them in Texas sometimes, but not like California. We have one like every week, because I live by the San Andreas Fault, so we have earthquakes. It happens all the time. I'm used to that, and that's what it is. It's like being in Jello, moving back and forth. And that's probably what they did. But these were just old plans that we learned, and that's probably, we took some of the stuff from the pyramids and built stuff from it. And that's very interesting, because like I said, there's people who do this now who are professionals, so they can't even do what they did there. They don't even know where to begin. And I mean, I've seen people, like he was saying, they're scientists that do stuff like that, and they have got pretty close, but that doesn't mean they're right. That doesn't prove anything. We're never really going to ever know unless we actually find hard evidence. We have a little bit of evidence that points to that direction, but till we actually find hard evidence, I keep all options open. But I probably do agree with James more. But I think there was more of a civilization or alien twist to it, and they helped us, or they had some kind of tools that that help them more. And I think that's why you're not seeing too many slaves. I mean, there were slaves that died, but that's why they didn't use 150,000. They didn't need to, because they had certain things to help them move. And I think they also rotated their slaves. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not an expert on the pyramids. James is more into this stuff. I know a little bit. I've always liked it because of King Tut and stuff, and the Mummy, and I always thought it was always awesome. But that's just my opinion, brother. You can go ahead and answer me what I was asking you earlier.
We have evidence and proof of the fact that the limestone blocks that were examined were reconstituted limestone. So they were poured concrete, basically. And it's not the exact same as concrete nowadays, but it's close enough for government work, so to speak. So we know that that did happen. Okay, that's based on scientific testing, analysis of the rock. We know that it was poured. We don't know that it was poured in place for sure. That is an assumption, I guess. But the reason I think that they was poured in place is because it makes sense. If you have the technology to be able to pour concrete and form these massive blocks, why wouldn't you pour it in place? Why would you do it at the bottom of the pyramid and then drag that big bastard all the way up? You know what I mean? To me, it just makes perfect sense that you pour it in place. As far as the rotation of the slaves, possibly. You know, to me, it's not as important the actual number of people as it is how it was built. That's what I was covering during the first half of the show, was just technically how the thing was built. As far as the alien thing, I don't think aliens built the pyramid. Now, that is not saying that aliens do not exist. I will never say aliens do not exist because I know too much to say aliens do not exist. But one thing you brought up about technology that's being used nowadays has a direct correlation from alien tech. That's 100% true. That actually ran through an office in the Pentagon where they would take salvaged materials from alien craft and reverse engineer them and try to figure out what the hell they were and what they could be used for. That was done by the military, and they farmed it out to companies. They basically would go to a head of a company, their R&D people, and say, hey, look, we've got this thing. We don't know what the hell it is or what it does. We're going to give it to you and let you mess around with it and figure it out and see what you can make out of it. You can have the patents on whatever you make. You can produce the products if you want to make money off of them. That's fine. We just want you to use your team to figure this out, and then we're going to use it for military purposes as well. That's how we got a lot of these things. You know, stealth technology. A lot of this stuff comes from that way back in the 40s and 50s is when it began, to where they started trying to salvage this stuff. That's all 100% true. It sounds like it's crazy, but it's all documented. Okay, there's been books written on it. There have been people that have actually worked on the projects that have come out and given testimony on it. So that is 100% accurate. If you're talking about the origins of the pyramids, where they got the plans to make them, where they got the idea to make them, and also if you're talking about the purpose of the pyramid, that's a very, very interesting conversation to have. Supposedly the pyramids were built as part monument, part tomb, to hold the bodies of the pharaoh and be their eternal resting place, and also as a monument to the greatness of that pharaoh. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes on with the pyramids as far as different celestial bodies being in different alignment during different times of the year, all that kind of stuff. Very fascinating stuff. But one thing I want to touch on, because we have limited time in the show, that Old Boy said that was really interesting was the idea of all the different pyramids at different points on the planet. And does that relate somehow to solar energy or some form of energy? Are they all strategically placed to either harness energy from space or to harness energy from the earth? That's another side of this. There are spots on this planet that are gateways, so to speak, where the realm between dimensions is thinner than other points. Some people call these portals to hell. Now, when they say portal to hell, it doesn't mean a portal to the actual hell, like the place where you go when you die if you're not saved, all that. That's not what they're talking about. It's just a catchy name for a place that there is a hell of a lot of paranormal activity that takes place. It's called different things by different people. But essentially, the idea is that you have a particular spot where there is a lot of paranormal activity going on. One such place is Land O'Lakes, where you got all the Dogman stuff going on. Everybody always talks about Dogman when they talk about Land O'Lakes, but there's also a bunch of vampire sightings and werewolf sightings and all kinds of stuff up there. So that is an area where you have a ton of paranormal and supernatural things going on. There are spots like that all over the planet. Maybe, and now this is all conjecture and theory, but maybe the pyramids that the Aztecs built, the pyramids that the Egyptians built, Stonehenge in England, all these different things, maybe they are built over spots like that, but they're spots where energy is coming from the earth. Because there's a lot of science that backs up the idea that energy can come from the earth and can power things. And I'm not just talking about geothermal. I'm not talking about that. There was a recent article in a scientific magazine that talks about studies that were done where walking barefoot on the earth can actually pull up energy and heal your body and make you a lot healthier and make your organs function more properly and all this. It was a fascinating article. I read it like a week or two ago. So there's a lot of science that backs up the idea of actual energy, natural energy coming from the earth and being able to affect your physical body and affect other things in the environment. So if that is true, and the science says it is, then maybe these pyramids were built over spots like that, where you had a great deal of, or a great concentration of, that natural energy coming from the planet. Maybe the pyramid was a way to harness and focus that energy for some purpose. Now see, that's where it gets tricky, because what was the purpose? We don't know. But I don't think it's because it's some strange supernatural or extraterrestrial thing. You know, it could be. Don't get me wrong, it could be. But I think the root of this goes to another thing Old Boy was talking about, of lost civilizations. I believe that we've done all this before, over and over and over again. I think mankind has formed great civilizations, and then those civilizations have met a catastrophic end for one reason or another. One time it might be that we blew ourselves up, and the next time it might be some great plague came and wiped out most of humanity. Another might be an asteroid impact or something like that took us out. I think over and over again we have had great civilizations that we have built up on this planet, and then something happens to wipe it out, and you have a small percentage of the population that survives. Well, much like today's society, if we were wiped out and only a small percentage of people survived, the odds of the people surviving actually knowing how to do anything that makes our society work are pretty slim. You know, think about, and I mentioned this on a past show, but think about this. How many of you know how to make cell phones work? How many of you, actually be able to build them and make them be able to call another cell phone? How many of you can make a TV show and figure out how to beam that across continents and put it into a TV? How many of you even know how a camera works? How many of you can get the power going again, can start a nuclear reactor, or can work a power plant? Probably none of you. Very, very small percentage, and myself included. I don't know how to do half those things. The idea that there's this mass extinction, a small percentage survives, but that small percentage doesn't know how to do anything to keep the society going. They do what they can. They feed their families any way they can. That's eventually going to amount to farming and hunting again to make sure you have food. Generations go on, and eventually people look around at all this amazing technology and all this stuff. There's going to be planes still sitting around. There's going to be cars, but nobody's going to know how the hell they work, because the people that were originally there with them are all dead. And you're talking 10 generations down the line, they're going to be looking back like, what the hell was this thing used for? What is this thing? I think that has happened over and over and over again. I think a lot of the things that we don't understand today of these ancient monuments and relics, They might be from past civilizations where their technology developed in a completely different way than ours did. You know, we based our whole civilization on fossil fuels and computer technology. There might have been a past civilization that based everything on crystal energy. You know, everything in their civilization is based on crystals. And we have no idea how that works. We know crystals can contain power. They're used in some of our technology to harness electricity and computing power and stuff. We know that that has a capability, but we haven't even started to begin to figure out exactly everything that goes along with that. Maybe their civilization was created based on that technology, or maybe a technology we don't even have any kind of idea of yet. There's no reason why a past civilization has to be like our civilization is now. It could be completely different. So that makes sense to me why some of this stuff we don't understand. The original purpose for the pyramids, who knows what it was? Maybe pyramids existed before the Egyptians decided to build them. Maybe they were just simply copying something else they saw, building something that was left over before. You never know. Archaeologists all the time are uncovering things they had no idea existed. You know, they'll take and dig up a site, and from a couple shards of pottery, they come up with this entire story of how that entire civilization lived. And who knows if they're right or not? They might not be. You know, they're basing it on very few actual pieces of evidence and information. A lot of that is assumption. So I think that's all very, very interesting. And I think that might play a role in the pyramids. I think there was a lot more to the pyramids than what we understand today. I don't believe that it's simply a burial spot for pharaohs and a monument to pharaohs, because some of these things took 20 to 40 years to build. You know, they cost fortunes to build these things, you know, in materials and all, and just the manpower required. Now, granted, a lot of it's slave labor, but you got to have people that are watching over these slaves to make sure they don't run away. You got to make sure they work. I mean, there's manpower involved here. I don't think they would do all that simply for a tomb. Because think, with the time frame it takes to build one of these things, the majority of a pharaoh's reign, that would be the major project of their lifetime, is building this pyramid. And there's more than just one or two pyramids. There's a lot of different pyramids in Egypt. And there's a lot of different pyramids around the world. And that's another aspect of it to me that's very interesting, is the fact that it's all over the world. We're led to believe the Aztecs built pyramids as symbols to their gods, and they did sacrifice on top of them to appease the god, to make their lives better. Egyptians built them as burial tombs and all this stuff. Other people built things for other reasons. Some things we have no idea, like Stonehenge. We don't know what the hell Stonehenge was built for. They had to have some sort of purpose, but we just have no idea what that purpose was. There's a lot of different theories, and maybe one day down the line we'll do a show on Stonehenge. So there's a lot of different theories, but we don't really know. I don't think that civilizations that are separated by both thousands and thousands of miles and separated by a lot of years would build things that are exactly the same almost for completely different purposes. That makes no sense to me. So I think there's a lot more that we don't understand as far as the purpose and the intent behind the pyramids. And that would be an interesting show to do sometime in the future, of all the different theories on what they were made for, why they were used, all that kind of stuff. Like I said in the beginning of this show, this one was just on how they were built. There probably will be more shows on these subjects, because there's a whole bunch of different directions that we can go on this thing. That's what I have to say about it. So does that kind of answer your question, old boy?
Yes, it does. And I'm glad you said it like that, and you brought up other things, because that's what I believe too. I believe exactly what you said. That's my theory, that everything's been copied. And I do still think, though, the alien thing comes into play. That's one thing we touched on a little bit. I think that they just overwatch everything we do. But lately we've gotten to the point where I think we are getting to the nitty-gritty, and we're figuring things out they don't want us to figure out. So that's why they're intervening in different ways now. Because we don't have any pyramids being built right now. Nothing like that. I mean, they're building cities. If you look at it, like, big Statue of Liberty and stuff like that, but that's kind of like a pyramid. No, not really a pyramid, but it's more like a statue, But I think that's where they got the whole idea, because their statues. It isn't just pyramids; it's also statues of pharaohs and stuff like that, and their gods. And I think that's where they got the ideas for that. But what I'm saying is, we're getting to the point where our technology is getting really sophisticated, and it's even getting to, like, with holograms. We're actually got holograms now. We weren't supposed to have that technology for 5 more years. Now we're already doing it. We have robots that actually can talk and move. And hate to say this, I don't want to get graphic. They're doing them for reasons other reasons, and they're getting them where they could talk to you and do things with you. And that's the next 10 years, And we're getting to a whole new level of we're going to have robots doing things. So I think that may be their downfall too. Like you were talking about, yeah, we were having a major. I can't say the word, major bad event happening. Almost everybody dies, but some people survive, and then they learn later down how to fix stuff. But I think the aliens intervene then. I think they teach people how to put stuff back together, if you know what I mean. I think that's how they learn things.
So we're like the unruly toddlers of the universe that are continually throwing tantrums and breaking all our toys. And the aliens have to separate us and say, all right, dummy, listen, you screwed it all up again. Let me help you fix it. Now behave, you damn self. But yet we just can't ever seem to actually behave our damn self. That's a funny theory. It's probably some truth to that, though, honestly, if you think about it, because look how mankind is now. I mean, we cannot go a day without fighting with each other about something. It is insane out there. I mean, and it's been like this for a long time. We're just more aware of it now because there's social media and 24-hour news, and everybody is constantly in everybody else's life because of social media and the internet. But it really hasn't changed much for decades and decades and generations. There's always been hate. We've always hated somebody. We're always at war with somebody somewhere in the world. I'm not talking about the United States, although we have our share of it. But I mean just somebody in the world is always fighting somebody else or hates somebody else for something. We can never just get along. So there might be some truth to that theory, as funny as it sounds. But that's about all the time we have for this show. So I'm going to throw back to Old Boy to do the shout-outs.
Thank you again, brother. And I want everybody to know that, yeah, we kind of did something different now. We kind of got a little bit into the alien thing. And even though it was about the pyramids, it was going to come into it eventually. We're going to talk about it. Because we haven't really done a lot on aliens, but I'm glad we kind of got to talk a little bit about it. I want to thank everybody on YouTube. Over 3,500 subscribers now. Remember, if you want to listen to our old shows, check on James Hershey Jr.'s YouTube. Not the singer, James Hershey Jr., the bald guy. It looks like Stone Cold Steve Austin a little bit. And he's got a flannel on. Not the singer, because some people are saying, oh, I got James Hershey the singer. I'm like, no, he's not a singer. There is a James Hershey singer, but that's why I said you put the word Junior in. If you want to get any stuff like shirts, everything else, he'll tell you the site to go on and check out our merchandise. And I want everybody to have a wonderful week. I really enjoyed this episode because it was just something different from, we got to talk about everything, history, culture, aliens, everything, government. We got to throw it all in one, and it was a good show. And I enjoy it, and I love doing this, and I'm glad for all you guys telling it, because a lot of people are saying how great our show is and recommending it and saying we do a great job. Thank you, guys, and I appreciate your comments. And if you guys want to leave any comments, please do so in the videos or on Facebook. Either check me or James Hershey are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so check us out. I love you, Demon Hunters, Sugar Ladies, and Misfits. Have a good night, and blessed be. I love you. And remember, keep safe out there.
The YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. If you type in that URL, you don't even have to worry about the search. You can just type youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. and you're good to go. Check out the channel. It's really interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. It's not just the radio show. We do put the radio show on every week. We put a replay of the show on the YouTube channel. So if you don't hear it on the radio on Sunday night, then you can go to the YouTube channel and catch the replay. It's always there. But we also do other videos. A lot of people don't know, me and Old Boy don't just come on the radio and talk about this kind of stuff. We actually go out and do this stuff as well. We go out and do investigations. We go out and do hunts to where we're actually looking for these things and trying to find them. So I've started putting some of that stuff on the YouTube channel as well. The video I just put up is of a couple very interesting entities that we captured on our last investigation in California. One is like a demonic face that's above our medium sherry. It's really, really creepy looking. And then the other one is this amazing full body apparition of what appears to be a demonic entity in the woods, almost face to face with Old Boy. He had a feeling that something was over there, and he went to confront it and see what was going on. And he was looking into the trees there, trying to see what was going on in there. And with the camera, we actually picked up the entity, and it's literally a couple feet away from him. It's really an amazing picture. So I just put that video up on the YouTube channel yesterday or the day before. So you guys can go check that out. It's pretty amazing stuff. I'm starting to do a lot more of that, put actual evidence that we gather ourselves on there as well. We go out with Shadows Pit, and I go out with other groups as well, and we gather this information. So we don't only do it here on the radio, we also do it out there in the field. So please go and subscribe to that channel and check out the videos. They're 100% free, and they're there for you to enjoy. The merchandise store is teespring.com/stores/staringintotheabyss. That's Teespring, TEESPRING.com/stores with an S on the end /staringintotheabyss. That's where all the merch is. If you want it, that's where you can find it. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support that you give us. Thanks for listening every week. And I want to say an extra special thank you to all of our listeners all over the world. There's people from Australia, from Romania, all over the place. And we love you guys, and thank you so much for listening. And I want to, from the bottom of my heart, I want to tell you, I'm damn impressed because our show is done in English. And here in the States, it's rare to find somebody that speaks multiple languages. But around the world, most people speak English, which is pretty amazing to me because English doesn't make any damn sense. The language is goofy. As far as the grammatical rules, they're silly. And the fact that so many of you guys can understand what we're saying is pretty awesome. So I love you, and thank you so much for tuning in. And that's all the time we have for this week. So until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.